Well, Antony Loewenstein is a Middle East affairs analyst and also the author of the Palestine Laboratory. He joins us now live from Sydney. Welcome to TRT World. Antony, just in your eyes, how isolated internationally is Israel right now?
Not as much as I wish it was. And I say that because the country that really matters here is the US. The US has the power to stop this war tomorrow, and they won't. So yes, the UN vote suggests that the vast bulk of the world opposes Israeli actions. But let's be clear, pretty much the vast majority of UN votes for literally decades on the occupation, on settlements, is relatively similar. The vast bulk of the world on one side. The other side is the US and Israel, alongside, as with this vote, a number of US client states, particularly in my part of the world in the Pacific. So that ultimately shows that, yes, many of the countries in the world don't support what Israel's doing, but the country that matters the most, the US, is happy for this to continue.
And on that very point, do you think that Biden is running out of patience with Netanyahu or has reached that point now? Because he used that word, indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. This could be the first time he's used that.
Look, it is. I see this as crocodile tears. You know, you've had in the last weeks, you have people like Blinken, Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, and now Biden sort of suggesting that Israel needs to be careful, they're targeting civilians too much. And what? Let's be clear. In the last week or so, the US has rushed, without congressional approval, massive amounts of new tank shells to be used by Israeli tanks in Gaza. They're trying to rush huge amounts of more weapons to Israel to fight in Gaza. This is what ultimately matters, not particularly what Biden or Blinken or Austin actually are saying. What matters is that the weapons are going to Israel to fight. So, at some point, will Biden get sick of this war? Possibly, but to be honest, I still feel like, from what I understand, speaking to my sources, this is going to drag on in the current form for weeks and weeks more. I don't see any indication that, by the way, any negotiations going on around hostage exchanges. There's nothing happening. There is small kind of low-level discussions in Qatar, but beyond that, there's nothing that's moving seriously towards the further release of hostages, which is so desperately needed on both sides.
So desperately needed. And I was reading an article today and just thinking, Gilad Shalit took nearly 6 years for that prisoner exchange. And here we are, just over 60 days, just on that point there of the hostage exchange. But that is a pressure point for Netanyahu, isn't it? And just so you've got the hostages, you've also got his own party, also the Knesset, the international pressure. And also yesterday we saw a letter from reservists saying, don't come and take that photo with us, saying it was just a PR stunt. They described that proposed visit to Tel Nof Air Base as distasteful. So just all these pressure points on Bibi, the magician. Can he survive this point right now?
Well, in the short term, possibly yes, but longer term, I suspect almost certainly not. I mean, all public opinion polls suggest that Netanyahu is deeply unpopular. If there was an election tomorrow, he would not win, including much of his far-right coalition. But it's important to note, as I've said for years, the problem here is not Netanyahu alone. The likely replacements for him, Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid and others, on most of the key issues, the occupation, the West Bank settlements, even the policy in Gaza, is remarkably similar. There's virtually no difference. There are many in Israel who oppose what is currently happening. It's just sadly far too few. And there is pressure on Netanyahu, of course, to get the hostages out, of which there's about 135 left, as far as we understand. And there are still thousands and thousands of Palestinians essentially being held hostage in Israeli jails. And even the Palestinians who were released by Israel in the last couple of weeks, Israel has rearrested huge amounts of people since then, more, in fact, that were released. So we have a situation here where there really, I think, needs to be not just international pressure, because ultimately the pressure that Israel will change its behaviour is the US and possibly the EU. But so far, what matters, as I said, the US is sending weapons, so is Europe. Germany is selling massive amounts of weapons to Israel as we speak. So the message Israel is getting is pretty clear. You keep going until potentially we tell you to stop. And then at what point will they stop? I mean, the reoccupation of Gaza, the apparent destruction of the entire Gaza Strip, which is what many of us fear. At which point, where are Palestinians, the 2.3 million who are living there, where are they supposed to go
Absolutely.
beyond neighbouring states who I fear are going to be bribed even more to maybe take them in?
And we heard Netanyahu just say, yes, there is disagreement with Biden on what he said is the day after Hamas. Is it too early to even think about where, as you said, the 2.5 million Palestinians will go?
Well, it's in fact, it's a deeply relevant question because you have huge amounts of Israeli politicians, Netanyahu, much of his coalition, in fact, many in the political and media elite, and in fact, the public, according to public opinion polls in the last 2 or so months, that say there is a sizable proportion in all those constituents who openly want ethnic cleansing, the removal of Palestinians to neighbouring states. This is not some fringe position. It's not a fringe position at all. Some Israelis, of course, don't support that, but huge numbers do, and that number is growing. Now, where would they go? Egypt, Jordan. I mean, there was a proposal suggested last week that some country like Iraq would be bribed to take some in. Now, none of those Arab states have acquiesced to that yet for obvious reasons. It would be disastrous politically and, frankly, morally to do so. But what is their price? How much could Israel and the US potentially bribe these states to take people in? Because if there's nothing left in Gaza at the end of this round, what are Palestinians supposed to do? Where is the infrastructure? Where are the schools? Where are the hospitals?
And
Anthony, where are they going to be?
Absolutely. Just very quickly before I let you know, is the rising number of Israeli military deaths, is that a pressure point? Because now we're just today 10 Israeli soldiers. 10.
Yes, is a short answer. And in fact, what I'm also hearing is that potentially there was a report that suggests that maybe a fifth of Israeli casualties in Gaza are from friendly fire, even putting aside Hamas. So yes, we don't even actually know the accurate figure of how many are dying and being injured, but it's a lot.
Antony, fantastic to have you on the programme. Antony Loewenstein speaking to us there from Sydney. Pleasure.